There are grave concerns that the secret taxpayer-funded polling commissioned by the Palaszczuk state Labor government at a cost of nearly $400,000 is being used for political purposes, not the public interest, and that's to try and entrench themselves to hold on to power desperately. If this polling was designed to deliver better services, then why wouldn't they release it? It's because it's to serve Labor rather than to serve Queenslanders. This is an abuse of power and an abuse of public trust, and it's got implications for accountability and transparency. Both the Australian newspaper and the LNP state opposition have lodged RTI right-to-information requests for these polling sentiment surveys. But the government has blocked access to these documents, allegedly due to cabinet in confidence exemptions. This flies in the face of the Premier's promise 500 days ago to release cabinet documents within 30 days under the pressure of the integrity scandal and the Let the Sunshine In Coaldrake review. Well, we're still waiting for this to occur, and it's still pretty, not sunshiny, but cloudy about what the small print is in the Premier's promise and what is or isn't included in the program of release. The government has admitted that the release of cabinet documents doesn't require legislative changes, as it only requires an administrative process. Thus, it's the Premier's choice to block the release of taxpayer-funded secret polling today. The only barrier to transparency is the Premier. If the Premier was going to accept the Coaldrake recommendations lock, stock and barrel, as she claimed, then stop blocking access to these polling documents rather than wheeling them through Cabinet to bury them from public view. Or is it her intention to keep using public money on polling for her government's purposes, not the public interest, and keeping it secret with no legitimate reason to do so? And this appears to be the case. While the opposition RTI request was completely blocked by the state government, the Australian received a heavily redacted response to their request that revealed that the polling contract wasn't just for the state measures this year, as the government claimed and as the Premier claimed in question time this morning. The Ipsos polling is due to run up until the state election next year over 66 weeks, not just in the lead-up to the state budget this year. And the contract says polling would, quote, draw out Queenslanders' view across a range of current issues and topics. And it says, quote, with topics chosen where there is a need to deep dive into understanding of the community preferences, perception, resonance, unintended meanings, thoughts on use of language, clarity and conciseness, end quote. Thus, this wasn't just about the June budget, it's an ongoing piece of work. Isn't the government an ongoing piece of work? Ipsos, who was contracted for nearly $400,000 on May 9 this year, was engaged only a couple of weeks after public polls indicated that Labor was on the nose in Queensland. The Ipsos polling contract was signed off by Assistant Director-General Michelle Wellington, a former Labor political staffer who previously worked as the Premier's media advisor. Now, this contract was on top of the $528,000 of taxpayer money on polling voters' sentiment about COVID-19 restrictions with Ipsos before the 2020 election, which the state government also refused to release. So, the state Labor government limits by law what its opponents can spend with non-taxpayer funds on election campaigns, while Labor digs deep into taxpayers' pockets to run secret polls which inform publicly funded advertising campaigns, which in turn align with Labor's election campaign material. And let's not forget that this state Labor government also embedded Labor lobbyists who ran their election campaign before the last election using 1 William Street, the government's executive building. They are shameless. They're like a third world junta in regard to their culture of cover-up, bullying, whistleblowers and obsession with serving themselves rather than the people. This is a government of chaos and crisis, but also of cover-up. Labor is focused on itself rather than Queenslanders, using taxpayers' funds to fix its image rather than fix the problems, and ruling rather than serving. They simply do not have the right priorities for Queenslanders' future.
Time's expired.